A small body hit the cobblestones. Hard. The thud echoed off stone walls. A girl, maybe 8 years old. Her arm twisted under her shoulder at a wrong angle. Her cheek pressed against the wet stones. She did not move. A boy dropped to his knees beside her. His hands shook too much to lift her head. People walked past. Nobody stopped. A bread cart rolled by. A guard turned his face away. In this kingdom, you learned early what not to see. The boy stared at the pendant around her neck. A black crow with ruby eyes. His breath stopped. Every child in the kingdom knew that crest. The girl on the ground was the only daughter of the vampire king. And the boy in the alley was the only one who saw her fall. What 4 words made the vampire king drop everything? Stay with me on this. The boy's name was Tomas, 12 years old. Bones too sharp under thin skin. He had slept the night before in the doorway of a closed butcher's shop, which is how he ended up in that alley behind the spice market the next morning to begin with. In the kingdom of Ravenmoor, you did not sleep on the open street. Not unless you wanted to wake up drained. The vampires of the high houses needed blood the way humans needed bread. A small body sleeping under open sky was a delivery to their door. The smart ones, the ones who lived, found shadows, doorways, corners that smelled of meat. Something to confuse the hunters when they came down at twilight. Tomas had survived 3 winters this way. His mother had not. His father had not. He did not remember either of them well. He remembered the cold. The cold he remembered like a sister. Now you have to understand who the vampire king was. Most people in Ravenmoor had never seen his face. They had only heard the stories. He had ruled for 200 years. He had ended 3 wars in single nights. 10 years back he had walked into the great hall of the rebel lords alone, and walked out alone. 40 bodies left behind him. The court called him Lord Varen. The peasants did not say his name out loud. They called him the Black Crow. The same crow on the pendant. His crow. And here is the thing. 6 months earlier, in the merchant quarter, Tomas had done a foolish thing. He had grabbed a loaf of black bread off a baker's table and run. The baker shouted. A city guard caught him by the back of the neck. The guard raised a short club above the boy's head, ready to crack his skull open. And then a small girl stepped between them. She was maybe 7 years old. A dark green cloak too long for her, pale face, and a small pendant at her throat. A black crow with ruby eyes. The guard saw the pendant. The club lowered. The guard's voice dropped. The girl said only 1 sentence. Tomas did not catch all of it. He caught 2 words. Leave him. Then she pulled a coin from her sleeve and handed it to the baker. The baker bowed so deep his forehead nearly touched the dirt. Then she turned to Tomas. She did not ask him his name. She did not lecture him. She pressed something small and cold into his palm and closed his fingers around it. A black crystal, no bigger than a pebble. Smooth, warm where she had been holding it. She said, "If you are ever about to die, press it. Hard. Say it out loud. Help. Just that word. He will come." Then she walked away. Tomas had not understood. Not really. He had carried the crystal in a knot of cloth around his neck ever since. He had never used it. He had not been about to die. Not until that morning. Not until he turned the corner into a damp alley behind the spice market and saw a small body face down on the cobblestones. He had known her before he saw her face. The cloak. The shape of the shoulder. The dark hair spilling out across the wet stones. He had run to her without thinking. Her cheek was cold. Not the cold of weather. The cold of a body emptying out from the inside. He turned her over. A bruise on her temple was already blooming. A line of dark foam had dried at the corner of her mouth. Her eyelids hung half open. The whites of her eyes had a faint blue cast. Tomas had seen that color before. On the corpse of a beggar man in the gutter behind the apothecary. Wolfsbane. Slow poison. Old vampire weapon. Used when you wanted a clean kill that looked like sickness. Someone had tried to murder the daughter of the vampire king and make it look like she dropped dead on her own. His hand went to the knot of cloth around his own neck. He fumbled it loose. The black crystal rolled into his palm. He stared at it for a heartbeat. 2 heartbeats. He thought of all the things he could say. Begging. Explaining. Apologizing for touching a girl above his station. Asking what to do. But his throat was closed. His chest was burning. His hands would not stop shaking. He could only think the smallest, simplest thing. He closed his fist around the crystal. He pressed it hard against his chest. He opened his mouth, and he said only 4 words. "Your daughter is dying." Silence. The crystal grew warm in his fist. Hot. The kind of heat that scalds. A voice came through it. Not loud. Not a shout. Quieter than that. The voice was low. Calm. The kind of calm that scares you more than shouting ever could. Where? 1 word. That was all. Tomas's tongue tripped on its own roots. The alley. Behind. Behind the spice market. The little one. The one that comes off Cooper's Row. There is a broken cartwheel against the wall. There is a... Boy! The voice cut him off. Is she breathing? Tomas put his ear against her mouth. He held his own breath. He waited. Then a tiny, weak puff of air against his skin. Yes, a little. How blue? Tomas understood. The whites of her eyes. Pale blue. Not dark yet. A pause. A single, long pause. He could feel something on the other side of that crystal. Something old. Something that had been still for 200 years and had just sat up. Do not move her. Do not let anyone touch her. Do not let anyone see her. I am coming. The crystal cooled in his hand. Not dead. Just cooler. The line was still open. He could hear breathing on the other side. Hard breathing. The breathing of someone running. The breathing of someone who had not run in 200 years and had just remembered how. Sir, Tomas said, there are people in the market. Should I hide her? The voice came back, rougher now, the calm cracking at the edges. Are you hidden? A little. Behind some barrels. Pull her all the way behind them. Sit at the mouth. Anyone comes near her, yell. Throw something. Do not let anyone touch her. Yes, sir. Boy, what is your name? Tomas. Tomas. If you keep her alive until I get there, I will give you anything you ask of me. Anything in this kingdom. He nodded before he remembered the man could not see him. I hear you, sir. I just want her to wake up. Tomas looked down at the girl. He swallowed. Sir, what is her name? What do I call her? There was another pause. Lyrian. Then nothing. He said it once out loud just to hear it. Lyrian. He had not known. In all his years on the street, he had never heard her name. He had only ever heard Princess. The little one. The crow's child. Lyrian. He set the crystal down on the cobblestones beside her hand. He took off his own jacket. A thin gray thing held together with 3 different colors of thread, and he laid it over her shoulders. He tucked it under her chin. He moved her hair off her face. He dragged her gently behind the barrels. 5 tall barrels stacked against the alley wall. Then he sat down on the wet stones beside her. He took her cold fingers in his. And then he started talking. He told her about the alley, about the broken cartwheel, about the smell of cinnamon from the spice market, about a black cat that watched him from the top of a barrel. He told her about the morning her father had carried her into the great square 3 years ago and held her up in his arms for the city to see. Tomas had been 6. He had been hungry. He remembered her small face peering out over her father's shoulder, looking at the crowd, looking at him. He told her she had given him a crystal once. He told her he had used it. He told her her father was coming. He kept talking because he did not know what else to do, because if he stopped talking he would have to feel her hand getting colder. Around him the city carried on. A woman in a brown shawl walked past the mouth of the alley with a basket of onions. She did not look down. A pair of merchants argued about a barrel of pickled fish. A bell from a temple 2 streets over rang the 3rd hour of the morning. The sun would not climb much higher today. Ravensmore's days were short. Tomas felt it then. A change. Not in her. In him. The hand he was holding twitched. Just once. A small flex of her smallest finger. His heart leapt. He bent close. Lyrian. Lyrian, can you hear me? Her eyelids fluttered. Did not open, but fluttered. A tiny line of air whistled in through her nose. She was hanging on. Somehow, against the poison, she was hanging on. Tomas wiped his sleeve across his eyes. He had not realized he was crying. He could hear something now. Far off. The sound of hooves. The hard sound of iron-shod hooves on cobblestone. Coming fast. Coming this way. He let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. He squeezed her fingers. Listen, he said. Listen. He's coming. Your father is coming. I can hear horses. Just stay with me. Just a little longer. Stay. The hoofbeats grew louder. 2 streets away. 1 street away. Tomas leaned back against the cold stone wall. He pulled her closer so her head rested on his shoulder. He kept hold of her hand. He could feel the warmth slowly leaving him too, and he did not care. Let her have it. Let her take all of it. The morning light, thin as it was, slanted into the alley. A square of pale gold on the cobblestones. The black cat on the barrel watched without blinking. Tomas closed his eyes. He felt her small chest rise and fall. Rise and fall. He felt her finger twitch again against his palm. It was going to be all right. The horses were almost here. The vampire king himself was coming for his daughter. The worst was over. That is what he believed in that moment. That the worst was over. He was a boy of 12. He could be forgiven for believing it. They were not the king's men. That was the first thing wrong. Tomas froze. The footsteps did not come from the mouth of the alley. They came from the other end. The far end. The end that opened onto an unlit service yard behind the temple. The end nobody used unless they did not want to be seen using it. 3 men. Soft leather boots. Long oiled coats. The wrong kind of swords for the city watch. Narrow blades. Single-edged. The kind that bent slightly so it would slide between ribs and come out clean. Nobles' blades. Assassins' blades. Tomas pressed himself against the barrels. He did not breathe. The first man stopped at the spot where she had fallen. He looked down at the cobblestones. He frowned. He kicked at something on the ground with his toe. She moved, he said. His voice was bored. Bored like a butcher noticing a chicken had walked off the block. 2 of you. Find her. She cannot have gone far. The dose was full. The other 2 split. One walked toward the mouth of the alley. The other walked toward the barrels. Tomas's hand went to the crystal in the dirt. He cupped it. He pressed it tight against his lips. They came back, he whispered. 3 of them. They are looking for her. The voice on the other side did not pause. Did not hesitate. How far behind the barrels are you? 2 arm lengths. Maybe 3. Listen to me very carefully, Tomas. Pick up the biggest stone your hand can hold. Hold it where they cannot see it. When the closest man's hand touches the first barrel, you bring that stone down on his wrist as hard as you can. Not his head. The wrist. Break his hand if you can. Then yell. Yell as loud as you have ever yelled. Do you understand? Yes. I am 6 minutes away. 6 minutes. Tomas looked at Lyrian. The blue cast under her eyelids had darkened a shade. The finger that had twitched lay still against his palm. He set the crystal down beside her ear. He felt around in the dirt. His fingers closed on a chunk of broken cobble, about the size of his fist. Hard, heavy, sharp on one edge. He gripped it. He waited. A long shadow fell across the barrels. A gloved hand reached out and gripped the top edge of the first barrel. Tomas brought the stone down with everything in him. The crack of bone was small, smaller than he had expected. The man did not even scream. He drew in a sharp, hissing breath through his teeth. Then his other hand drew his blade in a single smooth motion. Look, if you are still with me, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens in the next 4 minutes is the part you are going to want to tell people about. The blade came down. Tomas rolled. He felt the edge of it whisper past his ear. He heard it bite into wood. He heard the second man shout from the far end of the alley. He's here. The boy's here. She must be with him. 3 sets of boots were running now. Tomas scrambled across the cobblestones on his hands and knees. He grabbed Lyrian under the arms. He dragged her backward into the deeper shadow behind the barrels. She was so small, so light. She weighed nothing. But nothing is still too heavy when 3 men with knives are coming. The first man, the one with the broken wrist, staggered around the barrels. His face was a mask of cold fury. His good hand held his blade. He saw Tomas hunched over the girl. He saw the small jacket draped across her shoulders. He smiled. "Lord Marek," he called over his shoulder. "She's here. The boy is hiding her." Lord Marek stepped around the end of the barrels. Tall man, 40 maybe, black hair pulled back, a long fine face. He wore a silver clasp at his throat in the shape of a wolf. Tomas knew the clasp. House Marek, one of the 7 great vampire houses. A duke, a cousin of the king. A cousin trying to murder the king's only child. Lord Marek looked down at Tomas with something almost like sadness. "Boy," he said, "I will give you a chance. Step away from her. Walk to the mouth of the alley. Do not look back. You will live." Tomas put one hand on Lyrian's shoulder. He did not move. "I cannot," he said. His voice was so small he barely heard himself. Lord Marek sighed. He drew his own blade. "Then I am sorry." Behind them, Lyrian stopped breathing. Tomas heard the sound her chest did not make. The small rise and fall against his hand stopped. The faint warmth at her mouth went cold. He turned his back on Lord Marek. He had to. There was no choice. He bent over Lyrian. He covered her small mouth with his own. He breathed. It was the only thing he knew to do. The healer's woman who lived 2 doors down from the butcher's had done this once for a fisherman pulled from the river. Tomas had watched from the window. The fisherman had coughed and lived. So Tomas breathed for the daughter of the vampire king while a duke walked toward his back with a knife. The first breath he gave her, she did not take. He raised his head. He breathed again. He pressed his small hands against the center of her chest. He pushed. Once, twice, 3 times. He breathed for her again. He heard Lord Marek's footsteps stop right behind him. He felt the cold tip of a blade between his shoulder blades. "Get up, boy," Lord Marek said softly. "You are making this harder than it needs to be." Tomas breathed for her a 3rd time. Lyrian's chest moved. A small, wet, ragged breath of her own. And then, on the far wall of the alley, something happened to the light. The shadow on the wall grew longer, wider. It bled outward from the corner like spilled ink. Then it became something. Then it stood up. A figure stepped out of the shadow as if it had been waiting inside it. He was tall. Not enormous. Just tall. Black coat. Dark hair tied back. A pale, lean face that did not look 200 years old and yet did not look young. His eyes were not red. That was the thing the stories always got wrong. They were black. Black like wet stone. Black like the inside of a deep well at midnight. He looked at Lord Marek. He looked at the assassin with the broken wrist. He looked at the 3rd man at the mouth of the alley. He looked at Tomas, bent over the small body of his daughter. He did not speak. He did not draw a weapon. He did not move at all for a single long, terrible second. Then he was simply standing between Lord Marek and Tomas. Nobody had seen him cross the alley. He had not crossed it. He had not needed to. Lord Marek's blade was still raised. The vampire king's hand was already around Lord Marek's wrist. There was a sound. A small dry sound. A sound a stick of wood makes when it cracks. Lord Mareka's wrist had 3 more joints in it than a wrist should have. The blade fell out of his fingers and rang on the cobblestones. Lord Marek did not scream. He was a vampire. He was a duke. He was a cousin of the king. He had centuries of pride wrapped around his throat like a collar. He spoke instead. Varen, listen to me. The court. Do not. The vampire king said, say my name. His voice was quieter than the wind, quieter than breath. I gave that name to the woman I loved. I gave that name to my daughter. Nobody else has the right to it. You wore my crest at my table for 40 years, and you came after my child while I sat in council with my back turned to you. You do not have the right to my name. Lord Marek tried to speak again. He did not get the chance. The vampire king moved his other hand. Just his hand. Just one finger, really. Lord Mareka's body left the ground. It hit the stone wall of the alley 9 feet up. It hung there, pinned, by nothing Tomas could see. The other 2 assassins ran. They did not get to the mouth of the alley. Tomas did not see exactly what happened to them. Something passed through the air. Something like a black wind. The 3rd man at the mouth of the alley simply stopped existing in any shape Tomas recognized. The 1st man, the one with the broken wrist, did not even turn before his legs went out from under him and his head was no longer attached to his body. Then the alley was quiet again. The vampire king turned toward Tomas. Tomas had stopped breathing. He had not noticed. He was still on his knees over Lyrian. His small hands were still on her chest. The king walked to him. He did not stride. He did not stalk. He walked, slowly, like a man approaching a wild animal he did not want to startle. He knelt down on the cobblestones. He laid one long pale hand on Lyrian's cheek. The other hand he laid on top of Tomas's small shaking hand on her chest. He did not look at Tomas. He looked at his daughter. You kept her warm, he said softly. You kept breathing for her. You hit a man with a stone. Tomas, you held the line. I broke his hand, Tomas whispered. Yes, you broke his hand. That was very well done. She stopped breathing, sir. I tried. I tried to. I know. I heard you. The crystal carried it. I heard all of it. The king leaned down. He pressed his lips against the small bruise on his daughter's temple. He whispered something against her skin. Tomas did not catch the words. They were not in any language Tomas knew. Older than the kingdom. Then he turned his wrist. He raised his own arm to his mouth. With one quick movement he opened the inside of his wrist with his own teeth. Black blood, thick as honey, welled up. He pressed the wound to his daughter's mouth. He held it there. Tomas did not look away. He should have. He felt he should have. But he did not. Lyrian's lips moved. Once. Twice. Her throat moved. She swallowed. A small color came back into her cheeks. Not pink. Not human pink. But not the blue of poison either. Something living. Her eyes opened. She did not look at the king first. She looked at Tomas. You came, she whispered. Her voice was a thread. A spider's thread. Tomas was crying again. He could not stop. You told me to, he said. She smiled. Small. Crooked. An 8-year-old smile. Then she closed her eyes and her breathing went deep and even and she was asleep. The vampire king sat back on his heels. His shoulders did not move for a long time. He did not look at Tomas. He looked at his daughter's sleeping face. And on his face Tomas saw something he would never, for as long as he lived, tell another soul he had seen. He saw the most feared man in the kingdom crying without making a single sound. 3 days later, Tomas woke up in a bed. He had never been in a bed before. He had slept in doorways on coal piles, once in a hay loft, once in the back of an empty cart. He had not understood there were beds this soft. The room was warm. There was a fire. There were thick curtains the color of wine. There was a small wooden table by the bed with a clay mug of broth still steaming on it. He did not understand where he was. Not for a moment. Then he remembered. He sat up. His head spun. He had been bandaged across the ribs and along his left arm. He did not remember being cut. He must have been cut. The door of the room opened. A small figure in a long nightgown stepped through, holding a candle. Lyrian. She was thinner than he remembered. Her cheeks were hollow. Her eyes were dark underneath. But she was upright. She was walking. She was alive. She closed the door softly behind her. She crossed the rug. She climbed onto the foot of his bed and sat there cross-legged. "You snore," she said. He stared at her. "I was watching you for an hour and you snore." He did not know what to say. He was 12 years old. A princess had just told him he snored. "I am sorry," he said. "Do not be sorry. It was funny." She tilted her head and looked at him for a long moment. Her dark eyes were steady. She was the daughter of the man who had pinned a duke to a wall with a finger. She was herself 8 years old. "Why did you not run away?" she said. Tomas thought about it. He had thought about it for 3 days, even in his sleep. He still did not have a good answer. "I had your crystal," he said. She nodded as if that explained everything. To her, perhaps it did. "I have a new one," she said. She held it up. A small black bead on a leather thong. "My father gave it to me. He said I am not to leave the keep without it. Not even into the gardens." He cried when he said it. Tomas tried to imagine the vampire king crying. He found, surprisingly, that he no longer had to imagine. The door opened again, this time without a knock. The vampire king stood in the doorway. He looked, in candlelight, less terrible. He wore a plain black tunic. His hair was loose around his shoulders. There were faint dark circles under his eyes, as if he had not slept since the alley. He looked at his daughter on the foot of the bed. He looked at Tomas. "Lyrian, go back to your room. I will come and sit with you in a moment." She did not argue. She climbed off the bed. She passed her father in the doorway. He bent down. He kissed the top of her dark head. She went out. The vampire king closed the door behind her. He walked to the chair by the fire and sat down. For a long moment he simply looked at Tomas. "Lord Marek," he said finally, "is dead. He told me everything before he died. The names of every noble who paid for the poison. The route they planned to take her body. The reason they thought they could rule a kingdom after killing my child." He paused. "They were wrong." Tomas swallowed. "You said," he said carefully, "in the alley, you said I could have anything I asked for. In the kingdom." The king watched him without blinking. "I did say that, and I meant it." Tomas had thought about this for 3 days too. He had thought about a house, about bread for the rest of his life, about a horse, about gold, about being made a lord, about bringing back his mother and his father, even though he knew the king could not really do that. He had decided on something else. "Can I see her sometimes?" he said. "That is all. Lyrian. Just sometimes. So I know she is all right." The vampire king did not answer for a long time. Then he stood up. He crossed to the bed. He sat down on its edge so his eyes were level with Tomas's eyes. He reached into his collar. He drew out a small black crystal on a leather thong. He put it around Tomas's neck. He pressed it once, gently, against the boy's chest. "You are no longer a boy who sees her sometimes," he said. "You are a boy who lives in this keep. You will eat at my table. You will learn with my tutors. And if she is ever in trouble, even small trouble, you will know it before I do. Do you understand?" Tomas could not speak. He nodded. The king stood up. He walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the wood. "Tomas." "Yes, sir." "Thank you." 2 words. Then he was gone. Tomas lay back against the pillows. He put his hand on the small crystal at his throat. It was warm as a small living thing. Outside, The morning light slanted in through the curtains. A square of pale gold on the wooden floor. The same color as the light that had fallen into the alley 3 days before. He closed his eyes. He listened. He could hear small footsteps in the hallway. Lyrian's footsteps. Coming back. She had not gone to her room. He smiled. He lifted his head from the pillow to look at her as she opened the door.